Today on Lamp Talk, we sit down with two legends of the lighting world, Martin Smith and Lee Eldridge, whose partnership has taken them from the early days in the Harry Potter series all the way to the wild extremes of the Mission Impossible franchise. With over 25 years working together, they share how a rental house apprenticeship turned into global careers, rigging cliffs in Norway, defrosting generators in the Arctic, and diving 30 meters deep for underwater scenes. But at the heart of it all, it's all about loyalty, laughter, and a relentless passion for the craft. This is part one of a two-part exploration into the dedication and determination required to flourish in an industry that demands grit and growth. Let's dive in. So we want to welcome from way across the pond two really special guests for this show is Lee Eldridge and Martin Smith, who have had quite a tumultuous 5 years in their lives. I think generations of children have been born and graduated from college by the time you guys are finishing this project. Normally I start with, how'd you get started and what were you doing when you were a kid that made you want to be in the movies? But I think I'm going to go backwards on this one because since I've known you, Martin, you've been on this movie, and that's 5 years now since COVID started. So to me, it's an interesting story to go backwards on. But I will ask initially, how did you guys start working together? Did you guys come up in the industry?
So probably best that you answer where we first met.
So I was an apprentice at Michael Samuelson Lighting, which was based at Pinewood Studios. Martin was at AFM, and I left my apprenticeship, my trainee sort of terms, end of my contract, and was desperate for work, like we all was, but freelance, didn't really know where things was going to land. And I managed to get in on the first Harry Potter film. Okay. Made some calls, just trying to break down doors, and one of the guys there sort of put the phone down, and he sort of addressed the tea room and said, Lee Eldred, does anybody know Lee Eldred? And one of the guys there I was at college with, and it was just a random chance thing that it happened. And he went, I know Lee. And he said, well, what's he like? He said, he's a really lovely guy. And kind of like, sort of bigged me up to him. He lied, obviously, yeah. So I ended up on Harry Potter. Martin had similar sort of thing and was on Harry Potter as well, on the rigging crew. I was on the shooting. And then just for the next 6 months, I flitted between main unit, second unit, whoever needed extra labour. Martin was on the rigging crew all the time, and that was when we actually first met, and then just kind of kept in touch with them, just became friends and grew sort of through the industry together, really. Very similar timings.
What year was that?
99.
1999, yeah.
That's amazing that was that long ago.
Yeah.
I don't know, for some reason they always seem current. That they just came out a few years ago. I know they've made 1,000 of them. But
I mean, I was only lucky enough to do the first one. I don't know if you worked on any of the others.
I did bits on the others because it changed in it from AFM to Lee's.
So I was a trainee, as they called it, at AFM Lighting, which was the Lee Lighting rivals in the UK, the lighting rivals. And I'd got a job there as a trainee where you spend, I think it was 18 months in-house, and you got to learn the equipment. You worked around all the departments, textiles, stands, power, generation, basic lighting control back then. All these departments. Learned how to not only maintain the equipment, but to repair the equipment. And we made a lot of distribution boxes that AFM had sort of designed back then. Some really cool stuff even back then. And it was coming to the end of my time at AFM Lighting, and then they send you out as one of their electricians. They take a percentage off your wages, but you're an in-house AFM electrician. And one of the first jobs for me was on the rigging crew of Harry Potter. Wow. And that's where we first started to hang out, really, and got to know each other on that. We went on then to work on a few movies, didn't we? One or two of the Bond films.
Yeah.
We done Die Another Day. That was main unit electricians. What was that?
2002.
2002. We've been sort of bouncing off each other ever since, really, and then progressed into where we are now over the course of 25 years. I mean, That sounds crazy even saying it.
Yeah.
25 years.
Yeah,
I think that every electrician on the planet should have to go through a rental house.
100%.
I think
Totally
that should
agree.
be a
Yeah.
mandatory training period,
Definitely.
so that you know the gear, you know what breaks, you know how to fix it.
Yeah.
It's I think that should absolutely be a mandatory part.
And I think the AFM thing, very similar to the Michael Samuelson thing, was you done a set amount of time in each department. At Samuelson's, it was 3 months in each department, and things like going into the generator department,
Right.
which is, I mean, you know, the information you can take in 3 months is just so invaluable, even if it's down to learning how to prime a breaker against silly things that you wouldn't learn anywhere else, you know.
Right.
I mean, it not to put any sort of light on one specific element within a rental house, but everything, everywhere you go, you know, it's just an intense amount of time doing one job, even if it's just picking rolls of filter or gel, you know, it's you're there. And I mean, we still play games, you know, the gel numbers to each other and who can remember what. But, you know, it's just what you learn. And
Just Lee numbers or Roscoe numbers too?
only Lee,
It was Lee
mainly,
numbers, yeah.
Yeah, we had an unfortunate disadvantage that we had to have Roscoe and Lee.
Right.
So
Yeah.
some of the numbers crossed.
I think
over.
I'd struggle with Roscoe numbers, but maybe not so much now. But back then, sorry, I apologise. You were at Samuelson's, weren't you? Not Lee. I said Lee Lighting earlier, but
Oh, did you know? Yeah,
it
no,
was
Samuelson's,
yeah,
yeah,
of
yeah,
course,
yeah.
yeah. But I mean, I think one of the key things of going through the rental company and working at a rental company is you get to know not only the equipment, but you go and deliver the jobs to the sets, and you get to learn a little bit of early set etiquette, and you get to know the gaffers, the best boys. You get to know some of the electricians that are hanging around when you get to deliver, and you start to build a little relationship as early on as, you know, those first meetings. And I think that was key for myself and our rigging gaffer, Greg Thomas, who works with us. He also came to AFM Lighting and spent 18 months. We both got the job together. And the thing we've learned is that's where we started to bond with different crews, because we want to help. We didn't just deliver and go. We want to hang around the set for as long as possible until the office were literally calling to say, you know, where are you? There's more deliveries. And we're like, well, you know, the gaffer needs an extra pair of hands.
Right.
Is it all right if we hang out? And we had such a good boss, Richard Gamble. He's well known and well respected in the UK in the film industry. And he'd owned Mr. Lighting Rentals that AFM had recently purchased. He was running our yard as the yard supervisor, and he knew that we were just keen, ambitious. We'd do any overtime, we'd take any work that they threw at us, and he knew where we were heading. He used to let us hang out on sets, and
that's good.
he was a big part of that for me, because he gave us the ability to sort of bond and meet and start, you know, learning in the early stages. So that was great.
From my point of view, there's an important distinction between the European system, the UK system, and the American system, is that
Sure.
the gaffer in the UK system also does the flags and you know, all the diffusions, and so the entire lighting setup is really at your disposal.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, we're so used to the system that we do that the few times I've done it, I've had to sort of kick myself and remember that there's no grips to come set flags after we set the lights. But so when you're at the rental house as a young man, you're really learning the entire lighting spectrum. It's not just half of it.
No.
Well, you've got to learn the grip side in the lighting grip side, which is, you know, how to put truss together, how to, you know, spec what you're going to rig under a genie boom or a crane, or, you know, you're in charge of all the electric hoists on the set. You're in charge of anything that's to do with the lighting and the electrical distribution on a movie set, and that takes a hell of a lot of time to learn, you know, how to operate in all those different departments. Really, we in the UK, as you would have a key grip, we'd have a head of department rigger.
Sure.
So we lean heavily onto our rigging department and our riggers, which is the truss, the crane rigs, the motors. So we do have support, and we do have a team around us to do those, to help with those decisions. But ultimately, the buck stops with the gaffer, and that can, you know, surprise a lot of US and some other countries around the world that I've worked in do it the US way, but mainly in Europe we do it that way, and the gaffer's in charge. The buck stops with the gaffer on anything that's rigged to do with lights and power and distribution.
No.
I have worked your system.
Yeah.
Bob Richardson came to the UK to do Hugo, the Scorsese film, and they adopted the American system, if you want to call it that.
Yes, it's that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what we would refer to it as. But and it was just so alien. It was just like, well, we got to do that as well as that.
Right.
Where you're just used to doing everything. It was
Yeah.
kind of split into two separate crews, if you like, basically all electricians, and then you kind of like sort of standing around with the dolly grips and it was just alien. It just kind of.
Yeah, I don't mind it. You know, the couple times that I've done it, it's fine, but it takes a bit of adjusting. And I would be, it would be tough to see some of the electricians that work in the U.S. try and set flags and things. So it's a good balance.
It's funny, the DP Fraser Taggart I'm currently working with says, you know, whenever he's in the US, whenever he's shot in the US, you know, you put a light in and all of a sudden there's 3 floppies around it, a frame, couple of, and he's like, I don't need all that. What's that for? And it's like, I need the light, and if I need anything else, we're going to ask for it. But
Yeah.
you know, in the UK, you put a light out and you pause and you see what you're going to do with it before you start surrounding it with cutters and
Four flags. And,
yeah, exactly.
But it's become such the model for the way that we work, and it's really efficient in a lot of senses. But if the relationship with the key grip is good, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And if it's not as good, it's harder. So
Yeah, I can
you know,
imagine.
at least with one person at the head of the snake.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been lucky enough to work with some US grips and quite fantastic, really.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot from being part of that as well, you know, working with our friends from over the pond and seeing how they do it. And it you know, because they're the skills we need, it's good to work with some of the US grips that are very, very good at their job, I suppose.
I think every day's a school day, though. You know, there's always something to learn. It just someone rigs something a little bit differently, or you know, there's always something to learn. You know, and it's like, oh, I didn't realise. Why'd you do it like that? Well, it's, you know, well, yeah. I mean, can't think of a good example. Yeah, but you know, it's cool. It's even if it's down to little clamps. And who was the grip on Moose?
Moose, yeah.
We done
Schultz. Moose Schultz.
yeah.
Schultz, yeah.
little cardellini's and little bits and bobs.
Yeah, the
that he
moose
had.
clamp,
Yeah, the moose clamp. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic clamp.
Which he gave you one, didn't
Yeah,
he?
it did. It just pinches right in the end rather than the Cartellini.
Again, it's
It
just
had
like
this really cool way of just pinching on the end as well. And
yeah,
Well, I mean, I guess when you specialize even more, I mean, what we do as a whole is pretty specialized, but when you split that into 2 even more specialized,
yeah,
you know, there's a certain amount of additional, you know, focus that you're going to have on that craft. So
yeah.
you started with the rental house, you started working on some of these projects, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I mean, the work that you guys have been doing, I looked over your resumes, it's amazing. Like, it's really amazing work. And even as electricians, you get some really great opportunities to work on some fine films. And
Yeah,
yeah, we've been very lucky with
yeah, really.
with our, you know, the way our careers have gone, I guess you could say. But I think we've also put the effort into to build those relationships and to listen, to take time to listen
Yeah,
and respect the people that we've worked with. Some of the amazing gaffers we've had the pleasure of working with, and to listen and to learn the craft slowly, rather than trying. Now you see it, you know, kids out of film school that just want to be gaffers, and you just think, you know, take some time, learn the craft and really listen, and you'll be a much more respected and a safer, you know, all-round gaffer at the end of it. You know, it's taken me, I guess, 15 years before I really started getting into the main features as a main unit gaffer. But before that, there was, you know, years and years of being an electrician, then a best boy, rigging gaffer, you know, learning the whole film as opposed to just rushing this. And I think that's why the journey's been so good. We've been very lucky, I think.
yeah, definitely. You know, every now and then you kind of, in fact, we was talking about over dinner last night, this sort of imposter syndrome.
I know.
Yeah, and I don't think, I hope that never goes away, because I think it keeps you grounded. I think it keeps you humble. But yeah, I mean, I remember there was a guy that worked at Michael Samuelson's that run the stores, the sort of rental house, and Curly Bird, who was a fantastic character, he was kind of tough on us because he needed to be. We was kids, basically,
Right. Yeah.
And I remember him saying, so his son, he was, sort of always pointing. You go on set, he said, you keep your eyes and your ears open and your mouth shut. And I thought, if there was ever anything to sort of live your life by, I think that was it, But
Yeah, rules that apply to almost every situation.
totally, yeah. But yeah, no, I think starting in commercials, pop promos, and to end up doing the sort of movies that we've done, it's been fantastic. There's a lot of luck thrown in there as well, but you make your own luck. But yeah, just
The harder you work, the luckier you get.
well, maybe so. Yeah, maybe.
Well, but you have to capitalize on those opportunities too. Like, great, you might get lucky getting called for it, but you also have to perform you have to do the job.
I mean, the experiences that we've had, even on these crazy 5 years, it's the places we've been, the people that we've met, situations, they just this podcast probably isn't long enough. We've got stories that could go on forever, but if there's anybody out there even got an inkling of trying to get in, just honestly, I think it's one of the best jobs in the world. I really do. I think we're very lucky. It's for the experiences, the people, the places, it's hard work as well, and you've got to be committed, as we all know, to hours and everything else. But the rewards are also there as well.
We've talked about this with some other folks. It really is a journeyman job. There are very few people that walk out of film school and are able to gaff a feature film.
No, that wouldn't be accepted.
No, and I think the characters as well. Yes, it's about ability, but I think also as well being a little bit quirky. The DOP with the funny hat or the cravat or whatever it may be. That's the quirkiness. That's the sort of thing that makes people unique in their position as well, and a little bit of madness, I think, thrown in. And I think collectively, when you start talking to gaffers, even grips as well, I think we're all cut from the same cloth. There's, the kind of, everyone's very similar in their ways. It's very rarely do you find anybody that's not the same as us.
We're not office folk.
No.
It's like the idea of sitting in an office to some people sounds lovely, and I give them all the credit for that.
100%, yeah.
That seems like a torture chamber.
Yeah, it wouldn't be for me.
It would be horrible.
No.
Yeah.
But 5 years on one movie, it's starting to feel like that. Or two movies.
We went to Paramount yesterday, and I said, this is our current employers that have employed us for nearly 6 years. In August, it would have been 6 years. Yeah. So it's well over 5.5 years.
Yeah.
But I think some of the great things of working in the film industry, and it's the people you meet. I think, it's the people and the places you go, and the people you meet when traveling. And I've learned so much off the crews that we've met abroad and had the pleasure to work with. That they always bring something different. And, you've got to be open-minded. And as you say, every day's a school day. Yeah. And we're all learning off each other. And I think that's part and parcel of it. And that's what makes it a really fun, place to be.
Well, the extension of that then becomes the ICLS.
Absolutely.
Where you've now taken a concentrated version of that.
Yeah.
And you've put these people all in the same place. I've said it before. It's the only place you can get 50 type A personalities to all treat each other with absolute respect and dignity.
Well, it didn't happen as I was coming up through the ranks. There was very little information being shared between gaffers. It was kind of a closed and protective shop, really. And I think, I just wanted to break that down a little bit because, we don't know it all and we certainly need to learn. And if we're going to be safer, more acceptable crews, we need to, share some of the knowledge and share some of the, be more diverse and open up and let's see where that takes us. And that starts with communication. I really believe that. And that's, the tip of the ICLS is we're all now communicating and it's a wonderful space to be part of, to see everyone collaborating at long last. It's great.
Yeah. Well, again, there's one gaffer, there's one best boy, there's one of everybody on these sets. So it's not like you have a lot of cross pollination
No.
between these groups. So you go with your crew to the next job, and you don't talk to any other gaffers. You see them at an award show once a year or at a trade show, and that's it. That's the only time you get to see them.
But if you wanted any other information, you'd pick your phone up and go onto Google.
Right.
Anything else you want to learn about anywhere, and anything else in the world. But this, I mean, it's not only our industry. There must be other industries out there that are very similar. But
I hope so.
But a knowledge base, products. There's a million and one things that we don't know it all by any stretch of the imagination. We know what we know, and every now and then you say trade shows and bits and pieces. You turn up and there's new products. You go, wow, that's cool. Someone else has been using it for years. How did we know about this? And you do try and do your bit, and I think the ICLS is brilliant for that as well. It's not just crew and knowledge base; it's the products, and it's endless, really.
I think technology is just moving so fast.
Totally,
If you want to keep up with it, you're going to need like-minded people to chat and discuss with. As these new products are released, and that's, as you say, that's one of the great parts of the ICLS is the space where we do share all that information and knowledge. It's great.
Part of this is really about not so much a product sales thing, but that's a whole other thing. But it's really about trying to bring people together, and like you were saying earlier, it's about relationships, and it's about connecting with people in different places at different times on different days. And that's what makes this job really great. When you're starting a project, you've got your crew in place. You know who you want to hire. But all of a sudden you're going to go to Morocco. So now you've got a Moroccan gaffer. Now you probably got one or two people lined up there. But it's this cultivation of relationships with people, and that's what I really like about what we do. And like you said, the places we've been able to travel and people we've been able to meet it's stunning. It would have never happened otherwise.
No, definitely, yeah. No, we've been very lucky. I mean, Mission, even in the last year, 18 months, aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
You'd only dream of that as a kid, Yeah. I mean, I still have to pinch myself now, even thinking about it. We sit at dinners and stuff. And
in the same week, we went from an aircraft carrier to the North Pole, or to Svalbard, as 700 miles short of the North Pole. I mean, that was a weekend. We spent, 4 weeks up there with the polar bears, and seeing polar bears and filming with armed guards around us that wouldn't dream of ever shooting a polar bear. Let me tell you that much. But to scare them away if they came near us, and they're looking for food, and we are the food up there. So
maybe they're going to shoot you for the.
Well, I think you'd do less time for shooting the crew member than you would shooting the polar bear at Svalbard. They're that well protected, as they should be. But yeah, it's the travel, and it always fascinates me how good the crews are as you go around trotting around the globe. And some of the fabulous ideas that they come up with. That are just better in some ways than the way we would approach situations, and it's also based on the climate you're in and the environment that you're working, and they we've worked with mountain climbers in Norway on Fallout that rigged lights all up the mountain for us and distributed the cable network across. It's not something that we would have done, and to take a whole UK crew out there to do that would have been madness because we don't have the experience. No. And that applies in many countries that you travel to. You've got to accept that they will know how to work in their own countries much better than we ever could, and be more open-minded to that, of course.
Going back to the training thing that you said as well, when we was in Svalbard, we get there, we've shipped 4 200 kilowatt generators from the UK that came on a ship. There's 25-foot waves that have hit this boat for 4 days, wasn't
it? Across
the North Sea. When they get there, the ice was literally 6 inches thick over these generators. So the guy that shipped them assured me that they'd all been winterized. I opened up the side doors of the generator just to check, because it was all empty of fuel. They're going to put winterized diesel inside them. And when I looked, the water trap for the generator is frozen solid. So I switched the isolator on. the battery doesn't even come on. I mean, it's that cold, dead. Okay, what do we do now? So we find a feed on the side of the quayside. We've got little 2 kilowatt heaters inside the generator, trying to thaw the generator out. And you think, again, experience,
Right.
training, all the bits and pieces. A guy, Mark Joyner, that was in the generator store at Samuelson's, he was ex-army. I mean, again, knowledge, coming out of their ears. And you just sort of hark back to, things that they taught you, And again, we got the generators going, didn't we? It was challenging. I smelt a diesel for 3 weeks afterwards, but yeah, it was again, just everything you've learned leads to somewhere.
Yeah.
You might not think it today, tomorrow, but you'll be in a challenging situation, and there you go. I know how to do that,
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it's again just it's all part of the madness and all part of the show.
It is.
I think Norway was one of my favourite locations. Not just Svalbard, because that was fabulous, but when we went to film the jump in Mission 7 in Norway, where was that?
And Alessand and
Alessand or
Andelsness, wasn't it?
anyway, up there, we airlifted all the generators, all the cable, the distribution, all up 4,000 feet up the cliff using helicopters. And we're all then learning how to be load masters of helicopters
Sure.
and, how to land generators safely and how to dehook and how to, we had the specialists there, of course, the specialist Norwegian, mountain rescue. But we're all learning, and it's great to be part of that. And they're pinch yourself moments. And,
Definitely.
you do feel blessed to have been part of these major motion feature films that take you to exciting places and give you these experiences. It's been a fabulous time.
But it's another one of those things when somebody says, "Oh, how are we going to get power up there?" And you're like, "Oh, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We're going to fly it up there.
We're going to fly up there. Yeah.
Watch this.
Watch, I'll hook it
We're going to
myself.
spend a lot of your money doing it, but we can do it.
Yeah.
Hold my coat. I've got it.
Yeah. I'm going to unhook this.
We've worked on every scale of budget of movie and TV show and music video and commercial. It's not just these big features. We've worked on things free of charge when there's, a charity kind of job that shows up. We've worked with no budgets. We've worked, you've got to be a bit more, you've got to spend wisely when there is no budget, and you have to hit the targets of the budget, and you have to think outside the box sometimes. So, we have worked through all those low-end TV shows. We've done many of music video. We've done some great little commercials. We've done some tiny little feature films.
No.
And I think that's really where you learn the skills and the tricks of the trade. And without those, I don't think we'd have ever been in a position to manage something like a Mission Impossible franchise or a James Bond movie. Or
Of course not. Yeah.
you have to come through the ranks, and you have to learn by your mistakes. And I always say learn by other people's mistakes, because they're out there to be learned from. And I think, that taking that journey slow and finding the correct path will give you all the tools you need to then move into some of the madness. And it is madness of making some of these global features that travel from country to country, logistically planning the moves and getting the equipment around the globe and booking crew and lighting budgets, labour budgets, and, risk assessments and forecasts of, whatever's coming next. There's a lot to learn, and I think we're still learning.
Definitely.
We're getting away with it now, but
I've gotten better at my job as I get older, but I've also gotten better at correcting my mistakes faster.
yes,
So when I make a mistake, less people know about it, and I am able to fix those mistakes much, much quicker,
Yeah.
and with more creative solutions.
I stand there sometimes I stand at a desk, and I stand there some days and I think, should I be doing something? I constantly doubt myself, and I think, I haven't forgotten anything. I know everything's ticked off my list, and I'm quite methodical in the way that I work. And then I go, this is what experience brings you. All of a sudden, you've got a minute of calmness, and you think, I must have missed something. It can't be this easy, you know. Then all of a sudden, bam, the phone goes, something's changed, or we got to go to that stage, and it's all kind of chaos again. But yeah, it's they do come.
I think for Mission, the thing for me was we knew we were going to be doing a big underwater. A third of the movie shot underwater, and I decided that I wanted to become part of the underwater team as a gaffer. And in the UK, you have to do a health and safety executive dive qualification. And I had no dive experience at all. So the production kindly said, well, look, we'll sponsor you to go up to the North Sea, up to Alban in Scotland, to do your dive course. So I went up and spent 3 weeks doing the PADI and then this HSE rescue dive and HSE qualification. And, it was an amazing, but it was 2 degrees and it was in November a couple of years ago now. And it was so hard. It was one of the hardest and toughest things I've ever done. You do a 30-meter night dive and a 2 15-meter night dives, and you build up your kind of dive portfolio, and you have to learn how to rescue, how to, administer oxygen if there's a situation. You have to learn about all the things that can go wrong in diving, and pretty much I say it's basically 1,000 ways to kill yourself underwater diving.
It's easier to kill yourself than to stay alive.
It is.
For sure, yeah.
So anyway, talking about rushing to it, I then come back to the tanks that we've got built at Longcross Studios and decide that now I'm part of the dive team and I want to go down and check the lighting and figure out how it looks underwater. And when we were rigging, I spent most of the time swimming upside down, learning really the craft once we got back, because I'd learnt in a dry suit up in Oban because it was so cold, come to a 30-degree heated tank. And now I'm not in a dry suit. Yeah. I've only learned to dry suit dive at that time, and it's completely different. It's actually much nicer not in a dry suit, but it takes time to adjust. Yeah. And I kind of rushed in a little bit with some of the more experienced divers, and every now and then they'd look around and see me kind of doing the old upside down. Which you pick a stand up, and when it's not locked off and it tallies out. You do that underwater and it tallies out and it just takes you upside down. So, you've got to learn. What I'm trying to say is you've got to take things a little slower. You've got to learn the trade. Just because you could do it doesn't mean you understand it, right, and doesn't mean that you're competent at it. And just because you've got a certificate definitely doesn't make you competent. And I prove that to myself most days, to be quite honest with you.
The physics of your own body are one thing to manage when you're diving, but you're now trying to carry something underwater that has weights on it.
I must say I'm okay at it now, but the divers, the more experienced guys, our underwater gaffer Ryan and his team, they really are competent and they really are good divers. So I kind of phased myself out and became the surface gaffer again pretty quick, and let the real team get on with it. But it's great to at least appreciate how hard it is, because a lot of our production, I'm sure at the time, maybe they do now, they didn't realise how tough this show was going to be, and they didn't appreciate how hard it is to do 4 hours diving a day at 10 metres, and to be constantly underwater, and the effects of that, and I learned that, and I learned how tough it is, and some of the rates that are inflated for these guys and some of the girls are just, it's important that they are respected for what they do and rewarded financially, because it's a tough world once you go underwater and you're dealing with electricity underwater. It's a real game changer.
You don't even realize how much heat gets pulled out of your body.
No.
In a heated tank. That you're in for 4 hours, you end up shivering so badly.
I've seen a couple of guys come and you say it's 30 degrees and they're shivering, and you think,
it gets cold.
Yes.
Well, we might as well dive right into this last 5 years of your life. The underwater stuff that you did on that film as a team, your fixtures team. What do you call them? Practicals team?
Practical electricians. Fixtures, they kind of appreciate the word now. We didn't at first. We're like, I don't even know what that is. Well, is that you guys? But they're our practicals crew, which is your fixtures gang.
But they did some stuff that nobody had ever done before.
No.
I remember being in a meeting about 3 years ago, and they're talking about this gimbal that they're going to design. It's going to take all our sets, but it's got to rotate unlimited 360 degrees and tilt and pan and pretty much work like a full-scale remote head, or an Oculus that can rotate. But it's got to go underwater, and in those sets we need lights. And I'm sitting in the meeting thinking, I don't even remember a submarine being mentioned up until this stage, and now we're talking about a submarine in the movie, and many submarines. And all I could think was, the only way to do this safely is off batteries. If we're loomed at all to the surface, there's a potential risk. And if we're off batteries, I can guarantee we're 100% safe from anyone getting into a situation, an electrical situation. So I spoke to Joe Took, our head. We have heads of department, and he works head of my practicals team. And I just said, look, all I can bring to this is it's got to be off batteries. And the batteries need to be contained within the gimbal itself. So when we load the sets in and out, we can multi-purpose the network system, so we can, plug and play with the sets that come in and out. And that was my brief, and that's about all I could give them, really, that, because it needed their technical ability and their knowledge to then spend the next 3 or 4 months researching how they were going to do it and how they'd put this whole system together. And it became a lot of prototype testing, and we had a tank by that time that we could submerge things into up to 10 meters. It's different at 2 or 3 meters, but when it's going 10 meters, we're susceptible to much more water ingress, obviously, with the pressure. So not only did they have to design a system that would work at a depth of 10 meters, but it also had to be fully controllable wirelessly from the surface and be able to rotate and to, be multifunctional for different sets. And then we had to design the lights and work those into the sets and how we're going to, control the lights, operate the lights, and indeed install the lights into the different sets. And that's really where they came into their own. They came up with all sorts of different ways. We spent probably the best part of 3 or 4 months designing a resin system that we could build our own LED lights, and how we could manipulate those into a nice clear resin, which was done in a vacuum situation, so we didn't get any air bubbles. And they went through the hoops of trying to figure out how to do that. And they became mini scientists, really, in their own rights for, underwater lighting. And it was a journey they were on, and they took the bit between the teeth and they ran with that. And they really did do a mind-blowing job of giving us everything. But they delivered a fully controllable network where we had a Grand MA desk in the a reduced size that submersed in the network system, and we had transmitter receivers that were on several different points of the gimbal, so there was always 3 surfaced at any one time in a mesh system that then linked every time the next transmitter came out of the water, so I could control any of our LED lightings remotely as this thing submersed, and do the effects we needed. If we lost signal at any time, the Grand MA reserve desk that was in the system took over, running the whatever time code or whatever program we were setting at the time. And then when we re-linked with the mesh system, we'd carry on fully controllable back to the iPad as it is. We had a system where we'd pressurize the boxes or pull a negative pressure on the boxes. So we always knew if we had a leak before it went underwater. We had pressure drops every now and then. In the boxes, they built a system where we had cameras and lights so we could monitor any water ingress, humidity sensors, heat sensors, temperature. And we could fully monitor the battery voltage, the output. We have full control over anything that was starting to show signs of weakness or failing in any way. We could pause, we could surface the gimbal if needed, and we could look into the problems. But all in all, it ran for the last year and a half pretty faultlessly, or at least production think it was faultlessly. They were working tirelessly to keep this thing running for the last year, but you can imagine the complications of that. Yeah. But they took that and hit a home run. They smashed that out the park. Yeah.
I don't know how many people have tried to run Wi-Fi underwater, but it gets about a foot.
Yeah. We had a system. Now you say it. We used a Bluetooth system where we could put an underwater controller, phone controller that was in an underwater pouch. We could go down and put it on one of our receivers, and we could, use that to set levels on certain small things that needed controlling underwater. So we did have a system. We'd have what we called the magic wand on Tom's suit. We've got LED lights in his mask and on his backpack, and we've got LED lights on his hands and feet. But when he's off in there in the scene, you can't bring him up. You can't bring the gimbal up. So we had the magic wand that you'd swim down with. Ryan or one of the underwater team would swim down with, put it on his backpack and get within, a couple of inches of the receiver, and we could then program from above and set his levels on his LED mask, just for the scene and get a balance on the light on his face versus, whatever that scene was. So these things were learned on the journey, and we figured out how to do them, or I say they figured out how to do them. I can't, I've got to give them full credit for what they came up with. It's an amazing system.
But the two of you also have to know that you can trust that team to do it. And that's the part of this journey that as soon as you try and micromanage that situation, you're only going to slow them down.
I think also to note that we're talking about working in this industry. That team, we had Porky, who's an electronics programming specialist. We've got Matt Clark, that is a 3D printing genius now, but all learnt these skills throughout the job, really. Although Porky was electronics before, but Matt's now learnt we could 3D print anything we need to go underwater, and we know it's going to be tested to 10 meters because we've taken it there.
Right.
So the way we set it up was rather than have a full dive team 24 hours on standby to do the underwater work, Ryan Huffer was one of the electrical team in the practicals department, and I made him the underwater gaffer. He's a very experienced diver and has worked as a number 2 on quite a few features. But he was also installing the wiring system, the whole system he installed on the gimbal. And it just made total sense to me to have him as the underwater gaffer. Right. And he even himself said, I've never headed up an underwater movie of this magnitude. And, I fully supported. I said, you're going to do this and you're going to do it very well. I know you will. Because we've worked together before. I know his skills and his strengths and his weaknesses. And it was the best decision I ever made, keeping him as underwater gaffer, because he's been nothing but professional. So he jumped between the fixtures or practicals department and being underwater gaffer. So it didn't cost production a full-time underwater gaffer position, but any time he done any of the wet work, any of the underwater work, he'd get paid as for the underwater gaffer. Anytime he was installing stuff, he'd get paid underwater gaffer. But back in the workshop doing his general day-to-day, because he'd done all the other sets for us as well, amongst 3 or 4 others, he'd be back as a fixtures sort of level. So it worked very well. And it was the best decision having him, I think, as underwater gaffer.
You're coming up as a team working on and off together, and establishing a relationship. At what point do you sort of lock into these roles? Or at what point do you become the best boy?
I've got to be honest, I don't think I ever wanted to be a best boy. It was never my intention to be a best boy. Martin went to Budapest on a job with Fraser Taggart, 47 Ronin, Keanu Reeves thing, and there's very little work at home. It was, we're in the sort of golden era almost now, aren't we? But at the time there wasn't a lot of work. And Martin had gone away, and he said, if I can get you out here, I'll try and get you with me. And it's just as an electrician, because that's how we was working at the time. Martin started gaffering bits and pieces, and I would go commercials just as an electrician. Martin phoned me and said, you can come out to Budapest tomorrow. I was like, great.
This is the way you get them.
So I said, okay, yeah, brilliant. I was like, I hadn't worked. I'd had sort of 2 or 3, maybe a month off, 2 or 3 weeks, maybe to a month off. And I was like, okay, great. He said, yeah. He said, can you fly first thing in the morning? I was like, I can come now. So my wife was at work. So I phoned my wife and I said to her, I've got a job. She went, oh, fantastic, because we was struggling. And she said, the only thing is I leave tomorrow. She goes, oh, well, I'll come home now. We'll spend the evening together. Great. She comes home. So the next morning I pack all my stuff up. Off I go to Budapest, get there. And I said, all right, so what are we up to? And he went, I'll show you where your office is. I'm like, what? He said, you're the best boy. I'm like, what? He said, the guy that I had to go, he said, this emergency. He said, and you're the best boy. I'm like, okay. All right, baptism of fire.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my life, I was going into production offices and just sort of dealing with it. And yeah, a baptism of fire, it literally was. And just, yeah, I mean, to be fair, the crew out there was great. I think they probably see through me a bit as well. Was like, who is this guy? Oh, I'm sure he's not a best boy. But But again, experience, being on set, you kind of know how things work. And then it just kind of went from there. And then we done a lot of second units together. And yeah, sort of the natural progression was to go into a main unit. And that's kind of...
Well, it was natural when we jumped into main unit.
Yeah,
I've always said, and I believe it's true, some of the second unit stuff we done was tougher, bigger than some of the main unit work.
Yeah.
Maybe not now, but back then we were doing huge second units for some, like Maleficent and, what was Doctor Strange, and we done 47 Ronin, Kingsman. We would do, and it was huge, big stunts and many actors, supporting actors and stunts and explosions and big night shoots where we'd light up whole blocks. And I used to think, well, it can't get much harder than this. And I think that was where we really learned how to deal with the bigger stuff on the second unit.
That's it for part 1 with Martin Smith and Lee Eldridge. Stay tuned for part 2, where we talk about what it takes to stay at the top of your game in this industry.